everyone, to the 1:30 session with panelists Nicole Denler, Liam Haycock, Isaiah Gray, and Ryan Heck. My name is Dr. Billy Cowley, and I will be the moderator for this panel's discussion on MLK's Message is Universal. I have been at the university here for 14 years, and currently I serve as the Andrews School of Education Dean. I graduated from Upper Iowa twice, my undergrad and my master's, and then received my doctorate in special education from UNI. I was a middle school special ed teacher before coming back to the university, and I live here in Fayette with my husband, Matt, and our 4 kids. I'd like to first off and introduce Nicole Denler. She is ABD, which means all but dissertation, and she's writing her dissertation right now to finish her doctoral work. She is an assistant professor of communication at Upper Iowa University. She has a bachelor's degree in communication studies from Wartburg College and a master's degree in education from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. Nicole is finishing her PhD in communication studies from Regent University, specializing in intercultural and interpersonal communication. Nicole has worked for UIU since 2009. She is currently serving as chair to the Art, English, Graphic Design, and Humanities Department. Nicole lives in Elkader, Iowa with her husband Kurt and their 2 children. So thank you for joining us today, Nicole. Then we have, I'm skipping to Isaiah Gray. So if you want to wave, I'm not going in order, sorry, I should have told you where to sit. Isaiah Gray is a freshman at Upper Iowa. He graduated from River Falls High School, which is in his hometown of River Falls, Wisconsin. Isaiah is double majoring in political science and economics and is a tight end on the UIU football team. Isaiah is a leader of the Student Diversity Union and helped get the organization on its feet this year. After graduation, Isaiah is interested in going to law school and getting involved in politics. Thank you for joining us today, Isaiah. We have Liam Haycock. Okay, wave. A native of Stratford, England, is currently the head men's soccer coach at Upper Iowa University. He graduated with his bachelor's degree in English from the University of the District of Columbia in 2018. More recently, earning his master's in business administration from Upper Iowa University after serving as the graduate assistant for men's soccer. Liam spent many years coaching youth soccer in the United Kingdom and in the U.S. before transitioning into the college scene. Before his coaching career, he had a successful playing career in England and America before becoming a student athlete at UDC. At his time at UDC, a historically black college and university, he garnered prestigious accolades for performances on and off the field. During his time at UDC, he served as president of the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, or SAC, participated in a webinar hosted by Education USA as part of the Department of State, and designed to guide international students on higher education opportunities in the United States, and represented the university during the 2016 ECC Leadership Conference. Liam also participated in the 2016 NCAA Leadership Forum. Today, Liam resides in Fayette, Iowa with his fiancee, UIU cheer and dance coach Mary Hudson, and their golden doodle, Sir Lancelot. Our last member of the panel today is Ryan Heck. Ryan is a junior graphic design major with a minor in marketing from Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. He is a captain of the cheer team and is currently regional Wow Factor Sports cheer soloist champion. That was kind of a mouthful, sorry. When Ryan isn't cheering or studying, you may catch him doing drag with his favorite lady, Renee Sance. All right, so thank you all for being here today. We would like to remind you of a few things before we get started. Questions for this discussion were submitted to you via a survey last week. However, we will open the floor first for discussion and questions. So if anybody here in person has a question, we will wait. She's going to bring the microphone over to you so people online can hear the question, and then the panelists can respond.
Okay. My voice is very loud, so I probably don't need this. But so what do you think MLK would be proud of today, like with the strides forwards that we've taken as a society, and what do you think he would still want to have become better? Trying to say that in like the best way possible. I don't know how to word things sometimes.
Go ahead. Well, to answer the first part of your question, I think the fact that all of us in a room together today is something that he'd be very proud of. I'm a black student here, and I think that that speaks volumes to what he did and his legacy. I think that in general, he probably would be expecting more out of us as a society as far as loving each other better, just beyond race, but sexual orientation, all that different important things that people can't control about themselves and that people are expected to be appreciated for. So I think, yeah, just like the general love for each other, I think is something he would expect us to continue to make strides on.
Go ahead. Oh, yeah, I can answer. Sure. The good things is that, you know, we can have a Division II school in Midwest Iowa and draw such a diverse group. You guys, you have no idea until you really sit in the shoes that you are right now to realize how lucky we are to have the mix of life, you know, at this university. I can say, I hate to use the word shameful because I think that is a very powerful word. So the things that we could improve on, we have the opportunities to improve on, is improve social media, improve the way we talk to one another when we feel like we're anonymous. You know, we have many opportunities to love one another, but I don't think in this day and age we are showing it even to like the little bit we could. And MLK's, all of his messages were founding on love thy neighbor. So we lack that understanding, and I hope your generation proves me wrong and can just transform a nation, but I think we have a long way.
I mean, I think for me personally, with where I went to college, it's great to see that what had been worked towards, they were able to get. The HBCU it's a great place for ethnically people who haven't got that sort of side to them, where they're able to go to schools like that, who've not come from the best of backgrounds, who haven't been able to have those opportunities and those chances that we're all fortunate to have, and what we are getting right now. So I think from that side of things, that's one of the positives that has come from it all, is it has allowed for us all to be in the same classroom, that diversity in your teams. Across society in general, there is that more diversity that has been fought for. But improvements, as Nicole said, I just think there's a lot of negativity in the world, a lot of negative thoughts, a lot of negative press, social media. These are all things that are contributing to the way that we think. We start then creating stereotypes and things that we think about other people, but that isn't probably necessarily true. So those are things that we as individuals and as people can start to work on, because it does spread. Love does spread. The same as what negativity does, love spreads. So we have to make sure that we are reiterating that in our daily lives and making sure that we aren't looking at a certain someone and thinking, bad, not going to go near them, not going to do that. You've got to give people a chance. And those are still things that we're still working on today.
Sure, piggybacking off of that as well. I think although there has been like leaps and strides towards like a better society and things like that, I think like the improvements as well, like yes, can come from like internally and like your self-love towards other people, things like that. But it also plays really into effect how much like our government also still like plays into like social and racial injustice. As well as like things like certain states banning like critical race theory and things like that, where like the government still has such a hold on, you know, just overall racism. So
just to add on to the improvements, I think that this quote here set a high standard. Martin Luther King, he set a high standard for what he expected for our society. I think that obviously we can see that people or our kids are going to school together, all different races, creeds, backgrounds, and stuff like that. But I still don't think that we've achieved where our kids can go to school without feeling judged by the color of their skin. So I think that just to tap into the mind of Martin Luther King, that he had a high standard from the very beginning for what his dream was for an ideal place to live. So that's just something to think about for where we are trying to head as a society.
Thank you. Another question from the audience? Yes, for the mic here.
Can you hear me? Is this on? Okay, this is a question for Liam. So obviously in America, MLK Day is like a pretty big day. Obviously, like these guys don't have class. In England, like what kind of morality people show to celebrate MLK Day since it was such an American movement?
MLK Day in UK, I don't think, if I'm being honest, it isn't quite as significant as what it is over here in the US.
Yeah.
But it has had its foundations. It has laid out a lot of things in the UK that did need reiterating. I'm personally from the north of England, which is your working class background, miners, all that stuff from that background. So in the north, there's not necessarily quite the diversity. A lot of that is in the south of England, London, those areas. But what we've been able to work out now is the fact that for us with MLK Day, it has been hugely successful for us in being able to understand diversity more and being able to get people more interactive. Before, it used to be a case of this town, predominantly white. Nothing else can go in there, that's it. But nowadays, you see that you've got a mixture of black people, you've got your Southeast Asian, you've got a variety, and that's what we were looking for so many years in the UK that hadn't previously happened. So MLK has had a significant impact on our universities, our systems of life. But the UK is very different in the fact that there is societal issues with hierarchy. So you've got your poor system, you've got your middle class and your upper hierarchy. So that hasn't changed. Unfortunately, that probably will never change because of, as Isaiah said, government, and what Ryan said, that government hasn't kind of changed that, and it will never change, unfortunately. But what is changing is people's perspectives. As a white person from the north of England, before I came to the US, didn't really have much of an insight into what MLK did. But now, back in the UK, I'm seeing in the schools that I went to, they are now teaching that. They are now showing what he stood for and what he did to get where we are today and what we do need to do to get better. So for us, that's real help. And he is having a universal effect. It's not just in the US, he's also been able to have that message spread across the world.
Great, thank you. Another question from the audience? I'll give you a break to think a little bit, and I'll ask one that was submitted from the survey. How can professors address microaggressions when expressed in class? Now, this can be from the professor's perspective, but also maybe student's perspective and coach as well.
Oh, yeah. But the worst is I do have a couple stories. So I know this one I'll get long-winded. So I apologize. But if you've been into my class, I love stories. Okay, so when you think about microaggression is something as simple as, well, you're too small for that sport. Or, I didn't think you were that smart. Okay, that's microaggression, right? We see it every day. A good student, and I just taught intercultural, and they said, we need to learn to read the room. Okay? And read the room as simply as, should I have said that? You know, what should I have done? Okay, I wish I only had microaggressions stories to share. I don't, okay? I literally have macroaggressions that's blatantly in your face. I had a young student, he was a football player, he was my advisee, and Emmanuel came into my room, and I'm like, come on in, have a seat. I'm answering a phone call, it'll only take a couple seconds. I pick up the phone call, and the dad starts yelling at me. I mean, yelling at me enough that this African-American young man behind me can hear everything the man says to me. And he goes, you are nothing but a racist middle-class woman. And I'm like, okay, but I can't tell him everything I know. I just said, your son is struggling in class. And he goes, but you're refusing to help him. But he didn't know that I actually would let go of my classes early, leave my office, and go and sit in the back of his classroom and walk into the tutor center. I couldn't tell that to Dad, okay? But the dad proceeded to tell me how he was getting me fired for not financially helping him and not helping him academically. So I'm like, I think you need to talk to your son. And he continued to call me a racist on the telephone. I remember hanging up the phone, and I couldn't even turn around. Emmanuel was still in the room. I couldn't even turn around. And I won't forget what Emmanuel did, because later on he ended up hugging me in the cafeteria. I'm like, okay, so having a student hug you in the cafeteria, you're like, oh, maybe you should do that. But he goes, Nicole, he goes, look at me. I can't look at you right now, okay? I go, we'll have our meeting later, you can go. And he goes, no, Nicole, I need you to turn around because I know the question you want to ask me. Have you ever treated me different because of the color of my skin? Because during the conversation, just to let you know, that father was a minister. And he proceeded just to yell at me. Finally, I am a person of faith, so I go, just to let you know, my God would never let me speak to somebody like your God is letting you speak to me. So when Emmanuel said that, turn around, Nicole. I'm like, no. And he goes, I will answer the question for you. You have never treated me different because of the color of my skin. And I turn around and I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be a teacher. And he goes, get over that. You're supposed to be my teacher. And then I end up calling Amy Tucker. I'm like, yeah, what just happened? Maybe I should walk away from my profession if somebody actually believes that in me. I wish that was the only story I had for you guys. Another story, a really great story, but it literally comprehends why we should read the room. In public speaking class, I said you can pick any class. And now I actually refine it. You can't pick this topic in my classes. It's kneeling at sporting events, okay? And one student, he was great. He's like, hey, I just want to explain the sides of it, just as an information speech. I'm like, great, there's going to be no Q&A. We're good, all right? And so at information speech, he gets up and explains why we kneel, okay? And that's how he explained it. Why we kneel, that was the topic. But he had no idea in the room was a student that was honorably discharged from the military because his whole platoon died. His whole platoon died, okay? The conversation right afterwards, after that speech, then turned into a little debate. At the point, it wasn't heated. So I could say microaggression, okay, that was coming across. But then all of a sudden, it turned a macroaggression in my class. And the vet, he looked, just like, he didn't look much older than you guys. He stood up in my class, slams his fist on the table and says, I gave you that effing right. And just to let you know, I cleaned it up, okay? And he storms out. The whole class goes silent. And then we have a nice debriefing of what just happened. And then I said, okay, I can't do any more speeches today. You guys need to go. But then I called the Fayette Police Department and asked them if they would walk by my classroom for the next week. And just to let you know, that Vietnam vet absolutely knew why I had the police. He looked outside once when they walked by, why I had the police walk by my room. Because we've lost the ability to talk. You guys, we're from the Midwest. We don't want to be rude to anybody. But not being rude causes us not to talk. We have got to talk. We've got to say, okay, I'm worried about this. And we got to not throw the word racist or, because guess what? I am just naive. All right? Because I will never walk in your shoes. And that's why a story matters to me, because I know your story. When I know your story, I know you. And that's why I love doing what I do. I love working at this university. Even when, parents have called me and yelled at me and, students, I have to sit in the back of a classroom to get you to the tutor center. But I do love what I do. So that's what's great about things like MLK. And I make this a mandatory speech or to listen to in my classes because you need to know where we should be going. All right? So micro is little. Micro is just saying, you're not big enough. You're not smart enough. But just think about the macro things that we sort of sweep under the rug. I know that's so hard to lead into something else, but guys, I wish it really didn't happen in my classes, but it does.
Yeah, how are we supposed to follow that one?
I know. I'm like, there's no way to follow it, but I needed to share these stories because when I read that question, that's all I thought about. I'm like, you guys really need to know the stories because it happens on this campus and we just need to talk. It's okay. Just, it's going to talk. Arguments and debate are good things to have. You know, maybe the presidential candidates don't show it as a good thing to have, but these are great things to have. You know, and to leave a room knowing that you can still be a friend but not be on the same, understanding, it's okay. So tell us other microaggressions that it's okay.
Well, so I actually, coming into this, I had to kind of look up what a microaggression was because I didn't really fully understand what it was. But after reading about it, I think that that's what's so great about universities, because you bring in all different types of people from all different walks of life, all different races and stuff like that. And, just from being on the football team, I've learned how racism is perceived as different based on the region that you come from. Down south, like racism is very direct, very straightforward. It's very like if somebody's going to be racist to you, they're going to be upfront about it. And then in my experience in the Midwest, it tends to be more subtle, more backhanded, usually passed off as a joke or something like that. So I think that when you bring different people with different understandings of things together, it kind of creates microaggressions naturally. But I don't necessarily think microaggressions are a bad thing, though. I think it's something that can stir up very important conversations, and it's just, as Ms. Denler said here, it comes down to the willingness to sit back and actually have a conversation about them rather than, turning it into a little verbal assault on each other. So yeah, that's just something that I found interesting about them and why I just think that university is so unique.
Personally, I've experienced a handful of microaggressions as a queer individual, but I've also seen a lot of misogynistic or racial microaggressions. Not very many, thankfully, while my 3 years here. But I think within a classroom setting, I think the best thing to do is kind of overcome an individual's ignorance. So microaggressions are so ingrained within colloquial speech or within somebody's actions that their parents had taught them or their friends thought they were cool. And within that, teachers need to make sure they understand what the microaggressions are or how they might be doing it, because for some people it simply is not even intentional, it's behavioral. So going with that, if professors aren't necessarily aware of their own microaggressions or the microaggressions within their own classroom, how can they even act upon it? And then within that, it goes into the discussion, as we were talking about earlier, where it's okay, we're literally in college level classes. We should have an upper level of thinking where you can sit down and you can be like, hey, let's take a quick minute because what I heard is not what I would like to hear, and let's talk about that. I think that's totally reasonable for upper level thinking college.
Thank you for that. Liam, do you have anything to add from maybe a coach's perspective, if you hear anything?
I think in coaching, I think as coaches, we all hear the odd comment being made and that odd joke that is out of line. And those are things that we try to have a genuine conversation about. When we have team meetings, when we have individual meetings, we always sit down and talk about each other's backgrounds, where we're from, what our families have done in the past, all these things in which you lead up to learn about your individuals. Coach Mary's the same. She'll probably ask you guys questions about your family, about your backgrounds, because it's important to know. Like I said earlier, we have so many stereotypes that we throw out there, and it's so easy for me to just sit here and look at someone and say something about you. And that's how right now society is going about, is that we're too busy behind our phones looking at what's going on there, and we see things on there that we perhaps then take into our lives. We need to avoid those sort of things. I'm not telling you how to do your life, that's completely up to you, but having those conversations, like they've all mentioned, it is important. We're starting to lose that concept of communication. I went to a HBCU, it's going on to something else. I was in a classroom with black students. I was the only white person in the classroom. And for me, turning up to America as the only white guy in a HBCU, for me, I'll admit to you, I had my own stereotypes going into it, because I'd never really been in a community of black people. So for me, I can quite honestly admit to you all that I had my own stereotypes. But from learning and understanding over my 4 years at that college, I learned so much about each individual I came across. And my opinions shifted, my stereotypes shifted because of what I was learning in my time there. So if we as individuals can start, tap on someone next to you in the cafeteria, I want to know your story, I want to know who you are. So I'm not throwing those stereotypes and those ideas about someone out there that aren't true. We all have a background, we all have a past that defines who we are, and that they shouldn't be made up based on what we think you look like and who you are.
Anybody have any questions to follow up on that? Okay.
What do you think we as a society can do to, is this, hello?
Yeah, you're on.
What do you think we as a society could do to change our perspectives of ignorance from, like, sometimes there's people who are ignorant and genuinely don't know, like, for example, like what you were just saying, or there's people who are ignorant and choose to stay ignorant. How can we, like, change our mindsets to help educate them so that the ignorance is gone rather than getting angry and defensive and automatically taking it as their bad person?
You want it? Okay. I was just gonna say, you know, growing up as a person of color, I've kind of learned that there's a certain level of grace that I believe everyone deserves. I don't, like, everyone grows up with different situations, different knowledge of things, and there's no way that you could expect everyone to know everything about everything. So I think that there's a level of grace that should be offered to everyone as an opportunity to learn and understand and grow. Personally, for myself, if it's somebody like that's a friend of mine or something like that, and say they say something that was out of line, and, you know, I talk to them about it and explain why it's wrong. If you then proceed to continue to ignore that fact, then I'm just going to have to write you off as not a good person because you're just choosing to ignore it at that point. So I think the development of being willing to allow people to make mistakes and then just put an emphasis on teaching them why what they're saying is wrong, I think that is what can help move us forward, because then not only are people who maybe don't know, like, they're not going to be afraid to have the conversations, which is good. And then on the other hand, like, people like myself, like people of color, are willing to, like, not be so hesitant to talk to other people as well. Because I think that's where the barrier is in communication, is what we've been talking about, is just the fear of saying something wrong on one end, and the fear of the confrontation of somebody saying something wrong. So then that's what draws that barrier, which is something that we need to break down.
I think for me, open-mindedness was the biggest thing. Not being somebody who's just tunnel-visioned and just looks at things one way and that's it. It's actually allowing yourself to become open-minded to everything that's around you. For me, I think the biggest kind of intelligence I got was from a friend of mine. And I spoke to him very plainly. My first year of college, when I was at school, and I said, well, what am I doing here, sort of thing. Like, well, I don't quite understand why I'm at this school and I'm doing all this, and I don't quite understand what they're talking about in class about this and that. And he made it quite plain and simple for me, to where I then realized, okay, I've got to change the perception on how I look at things and how I perceive what I'm kind of looking at. And for me, it was when I was told, when I walk into a bank and I ask for a loan, and my black friend Lewis walks into the bank with me, and he asks for the exact same loan, same everything, we have balance, all of it's equal. And the thing he was telling me was, I would probably get it. If I walk into Bank of America tomorrow and I ask for a loan, they'll probably provide it to me based on complexion, accent, the way in which you talk and how you present yourself. And he said he wouldn't. He would be turned down based on complexion, his dialect of speech. The DC accent wasn't quite the prettiest to listen to, but it's still a person. and it's still the same person as me, no different, and he would have been refused that. So for me, from that point on, that's a lesson that I'd learned throughout my time here in the US now to understand that I've got to take into life, is that we all are the same. There's no difference. And the reason for that ignorance came about because I wasn't told or taught anything in school. I wasn't learned how to speak to someone of a skin of color or different ethnicity. That just didn't happen. But from learning and being able to put yourself out there to understand those things is what's going to make the difference.
I think also to like work on that problem as well, and kind of work towards, I guess, like the question. Let's just go with that. I think it really like also lies within our education system. Our education system is extremely whitewashed. If you don't know what whitewashed is, it basically is situations told in the perspective of the white individual. And so if you look back, that's why like the erasure of indigenous people when talking about Columbus as a child and things like that. It's just really important to go back and like rewrite our textbooks and to go through and like actually have the conversations in class like that, you know, don't necessarily portray like everybody in the best of light, but that's okay because as long as you're not like erasing somebody's entire, you know, history, it actually gives perspective and you can empathize with people that aren't the same color as you. Or even say like in an AP literature class, maybe the one person who's a POC of the authors that are on that list shouldn't be about, say, like slavery or whatever that may be. Like it all just needs to broaden up. And with that, it comes more exposure and understanding each other in a deeper, more intellectual level.
I can add.
Sure. Sure, I can always talk. But ignorant is a hard word, right? If somebody were to walk up to you and say, wow, you're really ignorant on this, we can't stomach it. It's like being called, that was shameful, what you did, that activity was shameful. It's just like ignorant. We can't take it. So when we hear it and we hear it about ourselves, what are we going to do? We're going to throw up a wall, okay? And we don't want to hear the story. We don't want to help change your mind, okay? But that's where we need to change the word, okay? If changing the word, we don't use the word are in our society anymore. We need to change the word ignorant, okay? Because guess what? When ignorant was developed as a word, it wasn't meant to be bad. It was just meant to say that we just didn't know. But now we've had such a negative connotation of the word ignorant. It's like as soon as you call somebody that, they immediately want to stop either talking to you, probably even being your friend, you know? And with that, we've stopped the conversation. So if we leave that word out of it, the only way we can actually start relating to each other is stop talking and listen. The older I've gotten, now that I can say I got some age on me because I have kids your age, that I listen a heck of a lot more. And that's what the speaker this morning even said. If you were on at the 9:31, he goes, I listen a lot more. And I'm on a school board too. And I listen a lot more than I ever did in my life. And at your age, you're always wanting to finish my sentence or do something like that. And that's what you do as friends. You're like, hey, I know what they're going to tell me. You know, I've already been at that party. I know what happened. So you're going to finish it. But don't finish it for anybody anymore. Sit back and listen to their story. Because their side of the story, even at an event you were at, is probably super amazing. So just stop talking. I know it's your best and worst friend, but stop talking and just listen.
Great. I think the education is the key, though, too.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Educating people what they don't know in all sorts of things. That's key. Go ahead.
Okay, so mine is kind of building off of both the microaggression and talking to friends who are maybe not ignorant, but they don't quite understand. So I originally come from La Crosse. I went to high school in La Crosse, and I went to a small high school, Luther High School. I don't know if you...
I know. I used to live in Holman.
Oh, okay, that's great. Yeah, and so I graduated with a class of 60 people. We had, in the entire school, I think, 2 people who were adopted from Korea and then 1 mixed student. And so all of my friends there, for the most part, had been through this like Christian school system from, most of them from preschool until senior year. And so at the school, like Ryan said, it was super whitewashed. And fortunately for me, my dad was in the Army and my mom was a professor. So they kind of taught me growing up about like experiencing these other things. And I just wanted to know, how could you like tackle these challenges with somebody who's grown up around like not necessarily people being racist, but people not understanding like other people's situations?
I'll start. Just like Billy had said that, first we got to start with just education-wise. My kids were lucky enough that for the last 11 years of their life, they lived and breathed at Upper Iowa. I took them to every event. Some events in Greek life, I should never have taken them to. But they lived and breathed that. So like you were raised in a group that you got to see it. You got to experience intercultural night. You got to do all of these. And a lot of people, they don't get that experience. So the best thing I've felt like, invite more people. All right, that's the one thing that, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power, and that's why we're at a 4-year university, because it gives you more to help open their eyes, okay? It's the sleeper effect. That's what it's called. It's like you can give them all the information in the world, but they might not take it in, but in a year, even maybe a week down the road, they start talking to their buddy about it. That little effect you want to happen in your life. That maybe they will not change your mind sitting right next to you, but you've given them knowledge that they maybe, hopefully, in the next week and the next year, start seeing things from the other side.
I think just on a personal level, like, it takes a lot of trust on both sides to be able to, have those kinds of conversations and like address some maybe instances of ignorance. I'm gonna kind of out my best friend, but one of my best friends here, he comes from a small town too in Wisconsin, and he at times has made some ignorant comments or just said some things that he didn't realize was kind of out of pocket. But I knew that I couldn't blame him for it because he's from a small town, and I know how small towns go, especially Midwestern small towns. I'm from a average to small sized town, so I kind of understand it. But I talked to him about it, and I explained to him, like, you don't have to like worry or watch what you say around me, but like just have the willingness and the open-mindedness to like listen and have the conversation if there's something that maybe you said that thought was okay, but it wasn't, So like, I think it's just that open hardness and trust that you establish with people. I don't know if this was just like a personal question or not, but if it were, or if anybody else in here has someone who's a friend of theirs who they may think, or they say some stuff that is questionable, just to establish that trust, I think is really important to then help progress them along.
I think, at least from my perspective, I can't really talk about like racially as much as I can talk about like in terms of being gay. I think the things that have happened like to me within the past 3 years are like a lot of people told me coming from smaller places that like I am the first like gay individual they've met or like things like that. And I think a lot of people have a lot of like expectations that like there is no room for growth. Like as soon as you say something wrong, you're screwed. Or as soon as you sound stupid, like people are just gonna, kind of roast you and move about your day. But I think like being somebody who is the educated individual talking to the person that is, say, more like less knowledgeable, it's really about keeping like a calm, cool, collected kind of perspective and also like kind of judgment free. Because at the end of the day, like if you are coming across as attacking them, or if you're coming across as making them like belittling them and making them feel stupid, then they're not going to obtain the like information. Instead, they can actually ask their questions that may sound stupid, but at the same time, then you can redirect that conversation to be like, listen, I understand that might be your expectation of whatever this is, but actually like it's more the perspective of this. And I think, at least from my perspective, it has been the most effective in terms of kind of getting a collective understanding of perspectives.
I think for with your question, Eric, I think I kind of relate to that very well. Grew up in a small village back home. There was no diversity whatsoever, I've already mentioned. But I was fortunate enough to get the experience over here that kind of challenged those views and those perceptions and those ways of which you're thinking. I was fortunate enough to get those. Not a lot of people are fortunate enough to have that sort of education and that way of life to where they can understand. So it's up to us as individuals where we do know what's right and what's wrong for the most part, but we can start educating. We can start spreading that knowledge of what we know. Because at the end of the day, MLK's message was exactly that. It was to spread that word to everyone. As I said, it's reached overseas, it's reached far and wide. And now it's our job, now in our generation, to continue that and to help it grow. So people who, for example, my family, never moved outside of a small village, have never been accustomed to diversity, have never seen that. They came over to DC for my graduation and they got quite the shock. And that was for them an eye-opener. It was an experience that they perhaps needed in order for them to change their opinions. They realized that young African American men and women are able to get themselves a great degree, good education. And those are the sort of stereotypes in which I was talking about before, in which a lot of people are not accustomed to. They don't understand that. Whereas now, from seeing that, my family are very much wide open with what they understand and what they have learned from that experience. Experiences go a long way. Unfortunately, there are some people who just can't get those experiences. But it's about us to go and teach them.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? In the back there.
Okay. So I guess I have a question, but it's more kind of like personally revolved, I guess. So I have a younger brother who is Black, and he is turning 4 this month. But we, like, I guess my family, we've heard other family members from like older generations say some very like blatant racist things, and I know that like they've like when they were growing up it was completely different, and we have come so far from then. But I guess how would you address it when they make like these comments or say things that are very I guess blatantly racist? But yeah, I mean, I try to stay as open-minded as possible, but it's not just, you know, someone like on the street or like in a store. It's also like a family member, so that also is like very difficult. I guess how would you recommend handling that?
Yeah, I mean, she was right. Like, you just got to tell them, you know, that especially if it's a family member. If it's somebody on the street, I mean, the likelihood of them respecting your opinion at face value is very low. But I mean, I would think if it's a family member, it's somebody you should definitely be able to talk to and explain and sit down and have that conversation about it. And then if they're still just ignoring it and, you know, they're going to be a burden to your little brother's upbringing and stuff like that, I think that's, I mean, I don't want to act like I'm making decisions for your life here, but like, I just wouldn't be around them. Like, that's just bad. And so I don't know. That's just what I would do. I mean, I've had conversations with my grandpa about both my grandparents are white, and I've had conversations with them about like why I knelt my senior year of high school at our football games. You know, I've talked to them about some just different little like microaggressions that we talked about earlier. You know, stuff that they would just say, not understanding what they're saying, and they've been understanding about it, so there was no problem there. So I guess it's just really the ball's in their court after you have that conversation. If they're gonna change and show how important your little brother is to them and how much he means to them, then, you know, they'll change.
Sure, I'll comment. You know, the idea is call them out. If you have the relationship where they're willing to say anything in front of you, I would call them out. But then afterwards, it's like, you know, when you have those haters in your life and you're going to show the success you have, and they can be the person that they're going to be. So when this happens, kill them with kindness. All right, I have a friend down just a couple blocks away from me, and she's adopted 6 kids. And, you know, different backgrounds, different looks. And she's had people literally yell at her in Walmart for adopting kids outside of her race. And she couldn't believe it. And I'm like, just kill them with kindness. You know, love everyone around you and show them that the haters can hate, right? So you just be you, and your family just be your family. Because the ones that truly love everything that you guys are about, the other ones will go away. Guys, anybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for
Is this how close? Okay. I can super relate to this. So I have 4 little cousins that are very much mixed. Same color as me, basically. And we have had this conversation in our family around and around with many of our family members. And the best thing we found is to attack it head on. Because as soon as you give any amount of space for them to say anything, they feel like they have that ground to be able to always say anything. So we always nip it in the bud straight away. And I'm always quick to say something. Any of my family members, I'm like, if you're going to respect me, you got to respect what I have to say, because I'm coming for you now. So to help you with that, nip it in the mud immediately, and don't be afraid to. Like, I find that, like, being mixed, a lot of other mixed girls, and I don't know if you guys want to speak about it, also have this, like, fear of, like, oh, I don't want to step on their toes, you know. Don't be afraid to step on their toes, because it's about teaching, you know. So if they're going to say something, they better be ready to back it up. Plain and simple.
it.
I think on that, that's a great point. And I think what sometimes wrong is we always distinguish family different to other people. I don't necessarily think you should distinguish them any different to how you would address someone in your daily life. If you're going to speak plainly, that's the best way to do it. For me, I'm somebody who's very straightforward talking. I'll give you the honest answer and honest opinion, and goes with family. At the end of the day, if they want to be a part of that child's future, you're going to have to get on board. You're going to have to understand, you're going to have to be educated on it. And if you can't, then perhaps you cut them out of your life. I'm not saying cut them out completely, but it's one way that you sometimes have to address it, is, look, if you can't accept that my child is of skin of colour, I don't think we can be on terms until you're on board with that, until you can get across with the idea that you're okay with it.
Yeah, I'm no childhood development major, but I feel like that would have a very detrimental effect on a child's upbringing, just because of how malleable our brains are when we're younger, you know, and you start to develop certain thoughts about yourself or question, you know, yourself and stuff that's uncontrollable. And that, I could only imagine, would be very bad. Kev? By the way, are you in a club or organization in the back by chance? Yeah. I know Credence. All right, talk to me after.
Way to plug.
So, going along the lines of, like, kind of dealing with racial tensions in families, how would you address another person of color who has a rude comment about you having a white girlfriend? Because I feel like it's something that's, like, really, like, starting to come up now, since, like, I guess we're growing closer to racial equality. And so, yeah.
Would you say vice versa to that too?
Yes.
Damn.
That's a great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. I mean, I don't know. Like, personally, I feel like I would just say, like, stay in your own lane. Like, there's nothing else you can say. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Just basically just stand up for yourself, stand up for what you believe in, and yeah, love who you love. That's basically all I got for that.
It's just like her comment about asking about a family. You know, the idea is that we all place family as like bloodline, all right? I sometimes believe family has nothing to do with the bloodline, you know, because I've, told people that, listen, is you got to figure out who you need in your world and who you want in your world. There's a definite separation on who you include, okay? So once we draw the line of who we need, if you need mom and dad, you need mom and dad, or if who you want. Right now in my world, I would say I need my kids, okay? Even though they might not need me. I feel like I need them, but I want my husband in my world. Do I need him? But he knows that, guys. But think about it that way. Think about, okay, if this friend is really a friend and they're calling out a relationship that you're invested in, you have to decide, do you need them or do you want them in your world?
I have, sorry, something to say. I know I'm not on the panel list, but I just watched a movie over the weekend called Guess Who, and it was exactly, it addresses your question, and it has like Ashton Kutcher in it and Bernie Mac and all of this, but it's a white guy with a black girl bringing home for the first time, how their parents respond to that because she never told him. But then it's also about, what do people look at us? How do they look at us? Doesn't matter. I want you in my life. So if you're a movie person, Guess Who is what it was called. It was cute. It was cute.
I guess as a good general rule of thumb, if other people are telling you or judging you based on your life, then chances are they probably have a lot of problems with their own. So, like, I don't really know if you should take what they're saying seriously anyways. We got one right here.
I can talk loud. I don't need the microphone. You can scream, yes.
Here, you could do that too.
They need to be able to hear it on the...
Sorry, I don't even know if I'm supposed to be like, can I? I don't want to stand right there.
Just stand, you're good.
Okay, so like, for what you said, I'm white and my boyfriend is not. So, I mean, I didn't really worry about it. My family's very, very accepting. But I was presented a lot of the time with the fact that I wasn't Hispanic and like whatever by other individuals. I wasn't Hispanic and I'm not going to be like able to understand them and whatever. And something that I like to point out is like that right there, that quote. Like, even though it doesn't pertain, or at the time it didn't pertain to white individuals because they weren't being judged by their color. In general, right now, it's like the whole thing. That is all for everything. So it doesn't matter that it was like aimed at getting people of color towards equality. Now it's like the character is what matters, even if it is towards a white person. And that's something that you could preach to your family members in order to get them to understand, like, hey, even though they're not a minority, like, this is exactly what he was pushing for. Like, he wanted it to be character, not color. Like, doesn't matter that they're white, look at their character. I don't know.
Also, to piggyback off of that, I'm definitely not on the panel, but I'm a huge Steve Harvey fan, and he just was recently interviewed, and it talked about interracial relationships. And in my family, we're from the deep, deep South, and my cousin is actually married to a black man, and it was a big deal in our family, so that's what kind of started me watching this. And I love what he said, because he talked about family and friends and interracial relationships. But I think this could just be like a lesson in life. The second that your family or your friends are questioning the character, like your personal character, they're no longer family and friends, especially if they're questioning you on something that has nothing to do with moral integrity. So I think that's just like a good foundation for life.
There's another question over here.
Okay, I'm going to switch it up a little bit. So what do you guys think, or what do you think Dr. King would think about the workplace currently in America and throughout society, especially with diversity initiatives going around and hiring people of color? and from different cultural backgrounds just to get percents up.
Just to get what? What'd you-
Percents, like percentage
Oh,
up.
got it. I think we're all should be given a chance, you know, so it's up to the individual of how you present yourself. You know, it's building the right resume, it's knowing the background. Yes, I absolutely want MLK's message to get across and diversity, but does it need to be building a percentage? You know, I don't know. Okay, I will be honest there, I don't know. I want the right person in the right job, but I also want enough diversity that everyone appreciates each other.
As someone who's like studied numerous different like socioeconomic and sociology things, this kind of can take you down a really deep rabbit hole because I feel like a lot of what people who are pushing for social reform when it comes to jobs and stuff like that, they're trying to compensate for things that have happened over the course of history to help those of or people of color come up from the struggles of their ancestors. So I don't really know how to answer. There's not really one good answer to this, honestly, because it's kind of walking a fine line of almost becoming unequal in the opposite direction. Because if you set quotas or if you set percentages that you have to meet, like you have to have X amount of black people, you have X amount of like Mexican, like I think that takes away from hiring people that maybe could do the job better, you know. And I think you're starting to like define or limit who you bring in to a job. So I don't really know. Like I said, we could go down a very deep rabbit hole explaining why people want to do things like that. And so, yeah.
I just know, so I'm actually from like the DC area with a lot of nonprofit organizations. So my mom is actually many of their account managers, and she's seeing more and more of like the diversity numbers like versus her company. They're hiring people left and right, and some people of them can't even read or write. Instead of people who can actually do their jobs, and this is like an issue literally in DC, that they're starting to do that, even if it's like just because they just don't even have the education to do the jobs, and then they'll let them go in 2 weeks because of that. So here, I can talk loud. So I'm from the DC area. My parents and stuff, my mom works with nonprofit organizations, and an issue that is happening currently, especially within the nonprofits in DC.
Jenna, wait. Get that mic. They need you online.
Sorry, third time's a charm.
Hi, guys. Okay, so I'm from like the DC area. My mom works with a bunch of nonprofits within DC, and they are currently hiring people just to get diversity numbers up, even if they can't read or write. And working with nonprofits, you do need to have education because you're dealing with money. You're dealing with different issues across the globe because it stretches so far. And then within 2 weeks, they'll let them go just because it got their numbers up, which is like a growing issue actually happening within that area because me and my mom both work with them and we've seen it multiple times. That's kind of where my question stemmed from, so yeah.
And I can address that a little bit and something that just happened in the state of Iowa. In the realm of education, if you go to any school in Iowa, chances are you're going to have a white teacher, female teacher, right? So one of the things that the governor just talked about in her conditions of the state last week was a registered apprenticeship. The whole point and purpose of the registered apprenticeship is for schools to grow their own teachers. We have many diverse paraeducators in the schools, but the affordability for them to come back to school and to be a teacher is not there. So what this registered apprenticeship is doing is it's partnering with the Iowa Workforce Development to pay for individuals to go back to school to be a teacher in that area. That is one way to, one of the concerns is I'm going to school, but there's that disconnect between the teacher and the students. So how do we increase the number of minority teachers? It is really the attempt to grow your own. So something to think about if you want to make a difference. Sometimes it's in the classroom that you can make the best difference and to educate everybody about everybody else's needs. So that's one thing that Iowa just came out last week.
I think One thing I'll add to that is the school I went to, they did a great job of introducing initiatives to help with minority students with getting placed into fellowship programs, college programs with John Deere and other organisations that are quite big, like Lockheed Martin. And it was a great way to kind of segue into that next stage of life. And that's why HBCUs are so important. And I do wish that more initiatives did happen like that at a lot of other universities that weren't associated to that, is that they have these fundings that are in place for minorities to which they can go do summer internships. They've got guaranteed jobs after college with John Deere. I know a friend of mine, she ended up going to be an accountant at John Deere. It's those sort of things that I think is kind of bridging that gap. And it's fantastic that those things are now in place. And that's why HBCUs are such a comfortable place for minority students to be at, is because they're able to know that after their 4 years in college, they're going to have that career path that sets them up. And like I said, I do wish that more of those initiatives were kind of in place at a lot of universities like ourselves. I think those initiatives are fantastic in being able to provide that sort of what you're asking, but that education and that understanding that we've all got a good chance of getting that job. It doesn't matter who you are, what skin colour, or where you're from. If you have the education, you have the background, we're all now getting those opportunities to have those chances.
I think it's a double-edged sword, really, too. Just because on one hand you have people that are abusing it, and as Jenna was saying earlier, but then at the same time it's kind of like there are issues within society, such as say like women in STEM, or within just like racial quotas and how it's a white man's field or whatever it may be. And with that, like I think it almost is a necessity as well at the same time, which like it sucks because it can be abused, or it can be, you know, like talked about in any other way from tons of different perspectives. But then at the same time, like ideally it's all a progression. So this is a current thing that's happening where we have to be like looking at the statistics and we have to be hitting quotas. But ideally, then we have people that are, you know, coming out of situations that like systemic racism have like put them in, or things like, you know, oh, I so lost my train of thought. But overall, it just works towards a better future in terms of maybe if this is the current step now and it's not the best, that also doesn't mean that in the future it's not going to be improved due to it.
Just kind of looping back to your initial question. I can't really speak on that situation. I don't know about it. But you know, if that situation were to be true, I'd probably say it's probably not right. You know, both from like the employee side and from the morals and ethical side of the company. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely not something that we want happening.
I have a question. Just looking at our panelists, I think we have a diverse group, not only for many different reasons outside of race, but also generationally. What King fought for the most is social injustice, in my opinion, making sure that everyone feels equal. In a society that was segregating people out for their color, for who they love, their socioeconomic status. And I feel like we made leaps and bounds to get out of that. And now I feel like we're kind of digressing and we're starting to label people again. What do you think the students and the faculty and the staff and people that are just listening in from other places can start to do to maybe make sure that we're not taking too many steps backwards while trying to progress forward in that sense?
Sure, I'll start. You guys stop looking over at me.
You break the ice. You break the ice very well.
Oh, I see. Okay. So mine's just one word: love. Love more today. You know, you could say I'll do it better when I'm an adult. You know, don't. You know, send out a great thank you card. You know, I sat down a year ago and wrote 80 thank you cards to everyone in the school district. And I actually commented on the job they did. Love more today. Your generation will be better when you show more love today. Okay, your guys.
It's about setting good examples. I mean, we right now we're in that stage, as you said, Mary, about how we all have labels and stereotypes and all these things that, as we said earlier on in this panel, there's just a lot of negative feelings and thoughts that are going on, and it's like, where has this come from? I don't quite understand the need for us to bring one another down. We're in a world right now where we are fighting more than just the injustices. We've got COVID going on, and there's a lot of things in our lives right now that are creating a lot of these frictions and problems, and we're not helping the situation by bringing one on each other down. It starts with us. It doesn't matter if you're just affecting one person. It's that one person that you're perhaps cheering up. If you're saying, you look nice today, or you say you're having a good day, and you try and put a smile on someone's face. I always tell our guys, there's one thing you can do every day of your life is you can try and make somebody who you perhaps don't know, make them smile. Just for that day, make them smile, so you make them feel as though they're good enough and they're worthy enough of being here. Because these labels that are going on, I'm sorry, they're just toxic, it's horrible. And they don't need to be around when we've got so many things going on. Focus on yourselves, focus on the people close to you, and then you can start seeing the patterns that other people start joining the exact same thing.
All right. We'll have one more comment. We're already over time, so I want to, respect the next panelists. So you have one more comment?
So I just had one thing to say about that. I think that just kind of as a society, we've grown to fall into the trap of just thinking as a herd. And I think that's what's really digressing what we're trying to do just together. Whether it's right, left, or otherwise, I think it's easy to fall into the herd mentality trap just because then you can hide within the pack, and rather than being an independent thinker and formulating your own opinion on things. So I think the promotion of thinking for yourself and believing what you believe to be true and what's right, I think that's something that can really be emphasized more now. We've had a lot of different social injustice in the last decade, you could say, that has caused a lot of controversy and a lot of debate, which is good. It's good to debate. It's always good to have these conversations. But I think that when people both have their influences within their families and other things, I think we've kind of built this herd mentality that has helped in digressing what we've been trying to do.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you to our panelists today for sharing your expertise and experiences with us. And thank you all to the audience members for discussing this with us. So I hope you have a great rest of the day.